Here we're going to have a look at interdependence, which is to do more with predator-prey relationships and populations and the food chain. So if we have a look at a very basic food chain, we've got a 5-tier food chain. Each of these is called a trophic level. You've got grass, grasshopper, frog, snake, and eagle. And there's a relationship that's going on here. So if I get lots and lots of grasshoppers, if the number of grasshoppers goes up, the amount of grass will go down because those extra grasshoppers will eat the grass. However, more food available means more frogs, which means more snakes because there's more food available, and then more eagles. If, for example, it happened another way, so if we went with a drop in the number of grasshoppers, you'd get more grass, you get less frogs, less snakes, and less eagles because their food is disappearing, and this would cascade. So this change would happen first, then this one, then this one. And we have two ways of representing these in terms of diagrams. So first way is a pyramid of numbers. Now there's lots of grass, so you draw like that. There's less grasshoppers, there's less frogs, less snakes, and even less eagles. So the width of the bars represents the size of the population. Now, if, for example, this was an oak tree, which in this case it wouldn't be because grasshoppers don't eat oak trees, but let's just hypothetically say this is an oak tree, then actually what you'd get is a pyramid that looks like that. All right. But again, it's not the case because this is not an oak tree, this is grass, and there's lots of grass. Biomass is slightly different. Biomass is the amount of matter there is. So biomass will always get smaller as you go up because, and this is the important bit, this energy here is lost. This matter is lost through things like respiration, growth, reproduction, those sorts of things, excretion. So some of the biomass is lost to the environment. So biomass will always get less. This is actually quite important because if you put a toxin in a population, and this happens with something called DDT, what happens is as you go up the food chain, because there's less biomass, actually the concentration of that chemical gets more concentrated until it actually causes real problems at the top of the food chain. And this is one reason vultures started becoming endangered, was because their DDT causes vulture eggs to get so thin that they just break before the baby's ready, which means that actually, and that's because it was really highly concentrated at the top, but there were very low concentrations at the bottom, but it just got passed up the food chain. A little bit more tricky, we've now got food webs, and this is actually more realistic because if you have a look at food chains, and if there is a relationship like a food chain, what will happen is as one population goes up, the other population will go up afterwards, which will cause this population to go down, which will then cause this population to go down. However, this doesn't really happen in reality because most species are part of a more complicated ecosystem, right? And that ecosystem is a food web, which means that if, let's say, my number of grasshoppers goes up, my number of lizards might go up, and my number of hawks will go up. My amount of grass will go down, which means that there's less food available for the rabbit and the mouse, which means their populations will go down, which means the snake population goes down, which will pull the hawk population down, which in turn will make the lizard population get even higher because there are less hawks around to eat the rabbits and the snakes. However, it might mean the lizard population also goes down because the hawks have only got the lizards to eat because there aren't that many snakes and rabbits. So this is a much more sort of dynamic population system in which one change actually has a whole range of unpredicted effects, which is why we tend not to introduce new species into an environment without lots and lots of sort of testing and theorizing and calculations, because things can go horrendously wrong. And even when you're really sure it's going to work, things can go really wrong. And you can just look at the cane toad, or it might be the bull frog in Australia, that's population, it was the cane toad population got out of control very, very quickly because they introduced it to eat one species and it started eating the crops.